A week ago, the Washington, D.C. region Virtual Racing League took on Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. It was the first round of a 9-round winter championship at a 3.5-mile, 20-turn circuit in America. This time we'll head back across the pond to maybe what could be called the root of sports car racing in England, and we'll be doing it at Donington National Circuit. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Sim TV. My name is Kyle Heyer, joined by 4-time IMSA Mission pilot winner Tom O'Gorman tonight for another 40-minute round of action from Donington National Circuit in Leicestershire. I knew I was going to mess that up. Leicestershire, England. Tom, welcome back. COTA last week, a little bit of drama with the full course yellow, but now this week we're going to take on a racetrack that is a lot shorter, maybe a lot simpler in some ways, but there are hidden challenges lurking ahead for all 40 drivers here tonight.
Yeah, it looks simple on the track map, but it is very challenging to drive, and it's also a new challenge for a lot of these drivers, as Donington Raceway Park is not necessarily one of the billboard tracks that the American Sports Car Championships tend to hit. So I love that we're moving over to the UK. I love that we're moving on to a new track that's going to challenge new drivers and bring new strengths and weaknesses to a head.
Well, qualifying is already underway, and of course we always start qualifying with the TCR machinery. At least this season we will do that. So we'll head down to the racetrack. Fastest lap times will be on the left-hand side of your screen, and obviously the field will organize by fast lap from top to bottom. If you'd like to follow along at home with live timing and scoring, as always, you can do that at simtvbroadcasting.com. You can also see on the bottom left on the ticker our partners rolling this season, Radial Tire. Of course, Radial Tire has been with the DC region for quite some time. So I'm glad to have them back here, as well as RP Performance. And of course, for RP Performance, based on site at Summit Point and Gasoline Alley, RP Performance is the only premier race car shop that specializes in Mazdas. With hundreds of wins in multiple classes and full service capabilities, RP is able to help with all your race support needs. So thanks again to the partners for jumping on board with us this season. As we roll around the racetrack, we'll get a look here at a lap, and I think we should ride on board perhaps with someone who we know is pretty competent in these cars, and I think we're going to jump on board maybe with Will Robbins here, Tom. So we're heading down the back straightaway towards the front straightaway, and I want you to walk me through a lap here of Donington National Circuit.
Sure, we're running the national circuit, and we're going to get 2 looks at this final chicane, which those curbs on either side of this final chicane are going to be a storyline tonight. But coming onto the front straight, pit lane just on the left, a relatively short front straight, already grabbing 5th gear though in these relatively short geared front wheel drive TCR cars. Grabbing the brake just as the pit lane entry exits into turn 1, which is a little over 90 degrees. See a big slip and slide for Alessi in front there, but corner opens up into a big downhill run, which will lead us through one of the most challenging corners on the track. Now you crest a little bit here down the S's, and then this really, really challenging right-hander, turn number 4, Alessi goes for a ride, and our track map will be interrupted a little bit as Robbins goes for a slide. But that shows you just how challenging that section of the track can be. Maybe we'll be able to rejoin another driver or Will Robbins as we work qualifying here. So here's another try at it with Darian Paggart, good buddy of mine, trying iRacing for the first time. He's actually using one of my old computers to be here tonight. But onto the front straightaway for now the second time at Donington Park. Again, this short front straight, which is one of the great passing opportunities down here into turn number 1, although this corner is faster than you think. So to get a run up the inside is a little bit of a challenge. Darian's going to go for a slide too.
Are we?
No, we're not. We thought we'd try something new, and it is not paying off.
Well, I think the interesting thing is, you talk about the track conditions maybe being a challenge. The track temperature is not all that warm, so I don't think that's really playing into it. I think maybe cold tires will be a topic of discussion. Traffic played into our first little run in there. So I think what we'll do is maybe we'll go top down and have a look at the circuit from that perspective, Tom. That might give us a bit of we'll have a less chance of having some traffic interrupt that. So let's head over and take a look at our other track map here that we've got tonight. And I guess you can take me through a lap there. And again, 3.149 kilometers around this short circuit. And again, we're not using the extension. And now take me through a lap here, Tom. I don't think we'll crash this one.
Back to the traditional way. So on the front straight there on your screen, left side is turn 1. And you can see it's just a little over 90 degrees, opens up on exit, and then down those really fast S's, which are blind at certain points. It's kind of tough to get a run on somebody, but it's not impossible if you can shove your nose into turn 4. And that really, really fast right-hander at the bottom of the S's at turn 4 is actually slower than you think it would be. It's a sharper corner than you'd think it would be as well. And that corner leads you on to another relatively long straightaway for Donington Park, turns 5 and 6, flat out, both of those corners, working to set up turn number 7, which is a really blind uphill entry that ends up cresting just at the exit of the corner, spits you out all the way to the left side of the track at turn 7, and then the run up to turn 8, which is a really early apex and then a very, very slow, gradual increasing radius corner at turn 8, which means there's a lot of line choices there. Do you take it in fast and try to get a good run, or do you take it in slow and try to get a run down the straightaway towards turn number 9, and then turns 9 and 10, the final chicane leading up back onto the front straightaway, which is where those curbs are that we talked about on the beginning of our first failed attempt of that ride-along track map.
Well, again, it certainly looks a little bit simpler from the the track side perspective, but I don't think it's going to feel any easier as we get later into this night. Especially some keys to the race we'll go over, and I think one of them was dealing with traffic, and I think that's going to be a bigger issue this week than it was last. Of course, we saw full course yellow. As always, that is a possibility. I don't think it's super likely tonight, but we could have that happen. And you were talking again about the curbing, and I wanted to point this out here. This first stage here, this blue stuff from here on over, that's fair game. These big red sausage curbs, though, you can mount those and launch your car into oblivion. So you really kind of want to stay off those. If you're in the TCR cars, I think the Gt4 cars might be a little bit more compliant over those, Tom, but you definitely have to kind of manage how much curbing you're taking if you want to keep your car under control around here.
Yeah, and there's a good look at how those curbs affect the car. They look relatively flat on the texturing within iRacing, but they absolutely will upset the car. And you mentioned in GT4, those cars made it be a little more compliant. The case is kind of case by case, because the BMW absolutely can pound over those curbs, but the Porsche, as we saw last week at COTA over the curbing in the S's, is really not happy when you hit some of those curbs. So TCR is kind of a spec race at this point, with only the Audi RS3 TCR being eligible or available in iRacing's service, but that multi-make racing within GT4 will really show its head here at Donington Park, I think.
So drivers already putting in lap times. Rob Kucera jumping back into the TCR machine this season, up at a 1:12.678. Should be about a couple second differential between our fastest TCR drivers and our fastest GT4 drivers. Murphy Nichols makes a return, and I think he's out for blood after running well last week and then kind of falling down the order towards the end of the race. So I think he's looking to jump back in to the battle for the top hunt. And also Elias Roman, the winner from TCR last week, he's certainly going to be going for another checkered flag here this week. And right now he has a little bit of work to do. He's going to jump up one of those spots and into second place.
Yeah, but that guy at the front, Rob Kucera, is a man to be reckoned with at any level of iRacing. He's really, really, really fast in the MX-5 Cup cars in a lot of series that we've seen. But he's going to bring this fight to TCR. As I say that, though, Forrest Landy goes P1 by about, what is that, 0.04 of a second over Rob Kucera, and things are tight as always in TCR. Well, one of the ongoing storylines in TCR is always that they create such close racing, and that's, again, happening here today with only the top 10 covered by less than 2 seconds.
We've got, I think, equal or more TCRs than we had last week. Benson Tai will make 13. He's the only TCR yet to put in a lap time. So 13 of those and over 30 GT4 cars, either over or almost 30 GT4 cars. So another full field. So the challenge of traffic, again, towards the end of a 40-minute race is going to be our focus here tonight. And looking ahead to the remainder of the schedule, Tom, this race, or this schedule, kind of covers more globally than we have in the past. Usually we've been sort of an American-focused schedule. Well, that's not so much the case this season. A week from now, we'll take on WeatherTech, Raceway, Laguna, Seca. Then we'll head over to Italy, to Imola, back to America for Sebring, then Alton Park, Suzuka, Monza, and Summit Point to wrap up the rest of the season. So we're a little bit everywhere this year, and I think this is going to bring some new challenges to a lot of these drivers. Some of these tracks familiar, some like Alton Park, maybe not so much to drivers that haven't had a whole lot of experience with them in the sim just yet.
Sure, and I love that we're taking these global platform cars and racing them globally in iRacing. Whether or not it's real racing or virtual racing, the racing action is very real, and it emulates what are becoming globally utilized platforms with the TCR and GT4 cars. No matter where you go in the world, if you're watching GT4 or TCR racing, they are the same cars as anywhere else in the world, and the Washington, D.C. Region Virtual Racing League is emulating that by taking them around the world, not only with the amount of tracks we're driving, but with a couple different formats. We have a 90-minute endurance race in the middle of the season. We have a 4-hour endurance race coming up elsewhere, and then we have that slightly longer race, 1.2 hours, to round out this season. So a big variety of tasks and challenges set out for these drivers throughout this season, with kind of a baseline of the 40-minute quote-unquote sprint race being the safe kind of comeback to, which is what we're going to see tonight.
Elias Roman jumps to the top of the timing board with a 1:12.311. That's a 3/10 gain over Forrest Landy in second place. So we're going to have a pretty good fight here in TCR tonight, that's for certain. With 15 minutes left here in qualifying, the TCR cars will conclude their laps. And while they're doing their cool down, I'm going to do a little restart to the timing and scoring here to get things ready for action for the GT4 cars. Just hang tight for one moment. While we do this, Tom, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the keys to the race, because I know one of the ones we talked about was traffic jam, the struggle of getting through traffic for the GT4 cars especially, and even for the TCR cars. We saw at COTA how much they struggled to get their own room to race with some of the GT4s towards the tail of the field. So how much bigger of an issue is that going to be than it was last at COTA?
Well, it's going to be about twice the issue because this track is about half the distance. So over at COTA, we were racing just over 2 minutes a lap for the TCR and GT4 cars. I think right about 2:17, 2:18 was the fastest laps we saw. Tonight, it is 1:12 will be the pole time in TCR, and in GT4, it's going to be just under 1:10. So that means that these cars will be interacting with each other twice as much throughout this race. And 40 minutes, I think last time we had a full course caution that kind of interrupted whether or not there was going to be much lap traffic as a part of the battle. But these two classes are going to see each other without a doubt tonight.
Well, I can already tell you that they're seeing a whole lot of each other on pit lane getting ready to go qualifying. And there's a whole bunch of cars all lining up. And tell me, Tom, you've had experience qualifying in IMSA before. What's it like sitting on pit lane, and is there a rush to get out on the racetrack, and do you want to be at the front or the back of this group right now?
Well, in real life is a separate issue a little bit, but in this case, these GT4 cars in iRacing do take quite a bit of time to bring the tires up to temperature, and with 12.5 minutes and so many cars on track, I do think there is quite a bit of pressure at a track this short with this little space to get going, get some clear track, and get a lap in early. You know, last week at COTA, I mentioned that you got plenty of time to kind of find your space. It's a big track. There's a lot of width and room to find. Here at Donington Park, as one of the drivers goes for a spin on his outlap, any little fine detail really makes a difference when it comes to finding your space on the qualifying lap and getting out there and getting a lap in the books. Because even though you can get the car up to temperature and turn a couple laps, get the car up to temperature within a much shorter period of time than last week at COTA, this week it's going to be way harder to find space. So right now the job is to find your space, get your tires up to temperature as fast as possible, and try not to blow your chances in qualifying, which are just going to set you up for a poor race if you do that.
Well, one of the drivers out in front of the field right now is DJ Alessandrini, last week's winner. And while it was close between himself and Ken Alseal, I think he's still the obvious favorite coming into this week. Car choice, again, the M4 this week, and one of our other keys to the race tonight, M4 versus Cayman. Which one would you rather have, and why do you think that? And what if you're in the other car, what do you do to overcome that?
Well, and this week will be very interesting to see, because last week at COTA, the obvious choice was the Cayman. I think that became very clear early in qualifying that the Cayman had the pace. That's what the drivers were saying as we talked to them earlier before the race even started. But in the case of Donington Park, the BMW M4 GT4 is much faster in a straight line. It gets going a little quicker, and Donington Park doesn't really, even though there's quite a bit of corners, you know, the BMW can stretch its legs in a couple of places, but it really comes down to that final chicane and the curbing, because the BMW can utilize those curbs so much more efficiently than the Cayman can. If it just comes down to that one final corner, the BMW is quicker, and not only quicker, but more forgiving. So I think we'll probably see it pan out pretty quickly at some point if we watch some of these cars go through that final chicane for even just a lap of qualifying. We're going to see a Cayman bounce off those curbs and go for a ride. We're going to see BMWs bouncing over those curbs and being completely happy.
And you see the Cayman already jumping a little bit sideways up over the top of the red sausage curbs. Paul Darling goes to the top of the board on the first lap out of 1:10.342. Alessandrini in second, Alex Larose. And look at Andrew Kessel putting himself in second. Ryan Daner jumps to seventh place in the 33. And Andrew Palata as well. And so many drivers, as they come through, they'll knock the TCR cars down the field. But I think, again, the tail end of the GT4 grid always ends up around the top side of the TCR cars. But Paul Darling is the wild card again. I think he was a wild card last week, but now he's going to have practice, which is a dangerous thing that he did not have last week. So maybe the 155 is the one to watch, maybe instead of Alessandrini.
Yeah, and Paul's actually been pretty frustrated this week in trying to get up to pace at Donington Park. I think it's a track that might be a little bit outside of his comfort zone. So that 155 car he's definitely expressed some frustration just with getting up to pace and knowing that he may not have the outright lap time. But if you know Paul Darling, you know that he's the first one to talk himself down a little bit, be a little hard on himself, and then come out swinging in a race. So not a surprise to see him at the front. You see the Cayman goes for a ride over the curbing. But I do think we need to keep an eye on Alessandrini, on Andrew Palata, any of those drivers driving the BMW, because as that car comes up to pace over the next 2 laps, I think that's when we'll see the true potential of those cars and see where this actually pans out with raw speed.
So 9 minutes left here in qualifying for our second round of the 2020 Winter Washington, D.C. Region SCCA Virtual Racing League. Again, my name is Kyle Heyer, joined by Tom O'Gorman. As we wait for qualifying to conclude, we'll jump down the field a little bit more. We'll find Francois Brou, and I think Francois in the Rodenzo Sports Car Challenge had some good runs. I think he's looking to run well with the other Francois, Flipsky. As you mentioned last week, we had the highest concentration of Francois in iRacing. So we have 2 of them again this week. The 69 car is Francois Brou, and the other one, I think, just jumped up in order and put himself, let's see, how high did he jump up? Disappeared on my screen. There he is, still 22nd in category in the M4. Last key to the race here, Tom. We talked about it a lot already, but the curbing, leapfrog, how to manage the curbing around here. It's really just the chicane that are the nasty ones. Everywhere else you can kind of get away with using the curbs, or relatively flat FIA spec curbing. But that last chicane, you can gain so much time there with aggression, and you can lose so much time there with being over-aggressive.
Sure, it's those red sausage curbs on the inside of either side of that chicane that pique my interest, because as I alluded to earlier, the BMW is more compliant and more forgiving through that section of track. So that doesn't only mean that you can be more aggressive as a BMW driver when it comes to racing against somebody else who may or may not be in a Cayman. There's a good instance of it right there, but it also means that consistency is going to be much more challenging for the Caymans in GT4 and the TCR cars in general. So look for mistakes to be made in that final chicane, whether they be small and allow somebody to get a run to turn 1, or whether they be big and put you into the tire wall.
Christopher Lapras here this week looks like he's trying to gather some space, and already we're seeing a lot more drivers struggle with getting distance just to qualify. So another thing I'm looking at here, Tom, is at the right side of the screen is all this dirt that's accumulating from running off track prior to the entry to the corner. While it's not necessarily the biggest deal here in iRacing, it's still something to consider, and marbles in recent builds have been more effective at looping cars offline. So you're going to want to make sure that you're online through this corner, especially with the speed that you carry through that corner, Tom. It's so crucial that you get that right, because the exit is pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Pretty constricting to fast cars.
It really is, and turn 4 here at Donington is very similar to turn 19 that we saw last week at COTA, where it's always a little slower than you want it to be, and you got to put the car all the way out on the dirt, just like we saw Alessandrini just do there. But that comes with a little bit of a risk, because if you're dropping tires there every single lap over 40 minutes, I think this race will be over 25 laps long. If you're inheriting 1 incident point per lap, you will end up with a drive-through penalty by the end of this race. So while putting a tire off in different places of this track all over the place is not as big of a deal like it was last week at COTA, there are a few places where it's really easy to earn just 1 point per lap. You know, if you're just driving fast, you're going to earn that 1 incident point per lap.
So the 19 at WDCR going for a ride, dropping a wheel off track and going for a spin. Andrew Palata jumps to third place in class. And again, the class differential is essentially what it was last week. I think we're missing a few of the GT4s that we had at Circuit of the Americas. But again, we have about just over 30 GT4 machines. See Jeff Miner go for a ride there, and 13 TCRs. So a nice class split here this week once more. Alex Larose, a relatively new name to this series. He's already proven himself to be a competent driver and runs in 4th right now in qualifying with a 1:10.471. A 1:09.993 for Alessandrini last time through. That puts him atop the standings, 21 thousandths ahead of Paul Darling, and 4 tenths in front of Andrew Palata.
The general consensus between the drivers was that the BMW may still be a little bit slower on raw pace, but more forgiving and more easily extracted for the raw speed. So the BMW being on pole isn't a huge surprise, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see a Porsche Cayman dethrone that pole time by the end of qualifying. The key is whether or not over a 40-minute race the BMW can stretch its legs and be that more consistent that the drivers suspect. The other thing that's interesting was also the number of cars, as you mentioned. There are way more cars up at the front in GT4 than last week because it's easier to get a clean lap in qualifying than last week. I think last week we had a bunch of GT4 cars that were a little lost in qualifying, and it ended up with TCR cars running over them pretty early in their race. I think this week, because the laps are a little quicker and a little easier to get your head around than at Circuit of the Americas, there will be more GT4 cars in front of the TCR cars on raw pace when we start this race.
We got a couple suspension cameras here on some of the cars, which I'd like to take a look at some point in this race just to see how much they're hammering these things on the curbing around this racetrack. And we're riding on board with Ken House through that chicane right there. See how much of a shock that is to the suspension. You're putting a lot of load in that car. And obviously, the good news is you can't really break these cars super easily. The problem is that, remember, this is on iRacing's new damage model. And you can break wheels off by hitting curbs too hard, so keep that in mind if you already have damage that might be conducive to you receiving even more. So keep your hands to yourself today. I think we got to tell all these guys before we go green.
Yeah, that's going to be tough because another thing that we mentioned at the end of last week's race was that when you go for a ride at Circuit of the Americas, you're probably going for a ride for a long time because it's a fast track, but you've got a ton of pavement and you can bring it back pretty easily. Here at Donington Park, you're in a wall a lot quicker, so being more precise this week is going to come at a much higher premium. As you saw, even just there for the number 3 of Alex Larose, finishing that lap, getting a little bit of a bad bounce through the final corner, and going for a ride on the grass. He didn't have much more room or margin for error going through that final chicane, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a few more bunks off the wall this week.
And even the walls, but think about the grass. I mean, at COTA, there's not really a lot of grass to be had anywhere. So even if you run an inch wide, you've still got either AstroTurf or concrete to catch you. Here, it's grass, and then the grass leads you to the wall, so that's really the troublesome part. No change out front right now for provisional pole for GT4. Alessandrini and Paul Darling still in front. Then Ken Alceal, Alex Larose, Andrew Palata, your top 5. Then Ryan Maloney, Lapras, Daniel Gross, Matthew Sisson, and Andrew Kessel rounding out the rest of the top 10. And again, your pole sitter in TCR was Elias Roman. He'll be lining up alongside Forrest Landy for the green flag. And just like last week, I would be concerned if another car jumps up here to make an odd number of GT4s ahead of the TCRs, then Elias Roman will be starting on the outside of the front row. So that run down to turn 1 for that second class will be interesting to watch.
Things are so tight at the front of GT4, both classes really, but we've got 3 cars on the same 1/10 of a second at the top with Alessandrini, Darling, and Hauseal. I know Larose has put in a ton of practice this week. Some of the drivers were saying over 600 laps of practice for the number 3 car, but he just got bumped by Thomas Layton, who was also a contender last week at COTA. So that top 5, and we'll lump in Andrew Palata there, is also really, really competitive. He was our top finishing BMW last week, and I believe he's back in that same BMW. So the top of GT4 is just absolutely on fire for competition right now. And again, well over 25 cars in front of the pole sitter Elias Roman, who he enjoys a 2.5 pole over Forrest Landy, which is a huge margin when you look at GT4.
Well, one thing I just noticed was Paul Darling heading down the straightaway towards that final chicane, actually slammed on the brakes. I'm not sure if he's trying to give Ken Alceal a tow here, but maybe they're teaming up on Alessandrini this week. He's always tough to beat, and I think these guys typically work together. They do what's called co-opetition, at least that's what I call it. Darrell Waldron calls it that, where you're sort of working together, but still kind of racing at the same time. Maybe Darling and Hauseal are trying to dethrone Alessandrini this week, and they might have something up their sleeve running that other car.
Yeah, that's a good point, as DJ was the only one to jump from the Porsche to the BMW for this round. And I think that's Alessandrini lurking in the background. Yep, there he is. So the 3 of them are still circulating, trying to find some open track. I know these drivers saw 106 6s and 7s in practice, so they're a couple tenths off of that, and they're probably not happy until they set a personal best. There's those Caymans over. Whoa, a huge jump for Hauseal, and that's what we're talking about. If you get a jump like that in the middle of the race, it's a 40-minute race, and that kind of mistake can absolutely not only toss you into the wall, but even if it just loses you a little bit, it opens you up for an attack down into turn 1.
Well, Paul Darling did jump ahead of Alessandrini in qualifying in the final moments. Look at Hauseal. The tire catches the curb again and completely launches itself airborne over the curbing. But with qualifying complete, your pole sitter Well, I guess we still have one more lap, and Alessandrini still might go after it, so I don't want to say he's not the pole sitter yet, but Darling did wrench it away by 13 thousandths of a second with a 109.980.
So tight, and that's just unbelievable to me that these drivers have dialed these cars into this point that the top, I'm just looking down the list, it looks like the top 15 are on the same second. And that's just so close. We're in for a treat here for 40 minutes, I think. We're either in for a treat or a mess, and my fingers are really crossed. All of them are crossed for a treat.
In 1 week's time, we'll head back to the west coast of the United States for WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca on November 4th through the chicane. Alessandrini coming to the line. Can he dethrone Paul Darling atop the board? He needs to beat a 109.980 across the line. 110.017. Paul Darling will be on pole for the second round of the 2020 Winter Washington, D.C. Region SCCA Virtual Racing League. All right, time to go racing. 40 minutes on the clock as it was a week ago. And again, there's always the chance for a full course yellow. I'm not really anticipating one unless things get really messy, but the race start is the big concern, especially midfield in GT4. Keep the tires underneath you, keep your car in one piece. You make it to the end of lap one, Tom, I think you're good for a while, at least until you get to the back of the TCR field.
Yeah, and that's where the pace of these cars kind of comes into question. I think the pole sitter times between the three is actually, or between the two classes, is close to 3 seconds. 2.5 seconds, which is a very similar margin to what we saw at COTA. So the TCR cars not nearly as quick relative to the GT4 cars as they were last week. And that means it's going to be that much quicker that the GT4 cars are coming up behind the TCR cars. So I think last week we saw the TCR battle was more influenced by GT4 than it was vice versa. This week I wouldn't be surprised to see both classes influenced by inter-class battles.
So the field is gridding up and we're getting ready to go racing here from Donington National Circuit. You're watching Sim TV. My name's Kyle Heyer, joined by Tom O'Gorman tonight. Thanks for joining us for 40 minutes around Donington National Circuit. And we've got quite the field to get through, so let's start rolling through it here, Tom. On the front row tonight in GT4, Paul Darling in the 155 and DJ Alessandrini in the 61.
Ken House-Seal and Thomas Layton line up third and fourth side by side on the second row.
In row number 3, starting in the 5th spot this evening, it's going to be the number 3 of Alex Larose alongside Ryan Maloney making another start here in the series. He starts 6th in the 20 car.
Andrew Palata, last week's top BMW driver, will start alongside another BMW driver in Chris Lapras on that 4th row.
Andrew Kessel and Daniel Gross will line up alongside in 9th and 10th in row number 5, 16 and 37.
And the number 2 of Matthew Sisson will line up alongside Evan Schickel, always a contender in that 6th row.
Ryan Daner and Dave Fitzgerald have row number 7. 33 car is Daner and the 91 is Fitzgerald.
And then Kevin Zhu in the 243 will line up alongside Francois Brou in the 69 car to complete the 10th row.
In row, here's Devin McEwen and Richard Spicer in 17th and 18th. That's row number 9 and row number 10, Tom.
Yeah, Chad Griffith in the 38 car and alongside Jeff Miner in the 32. That is your 10th row.
In row number 11, Darren Heath in the number 45, Scott Merker in the 77.
And then it's alongside David Thompson and Frank Taberzi. Will start relatively far back in the GT4 field on that 12th row.
Francois Flipsky starts in 25th in the number 8 car, and Chris Spiller starts 26th in the 980.
And then it'll be Cristobal Rodriguez, Ruben Monsanto, Lex Kurchek, and Mark LeBance round out the GT4 field before we get to the pole sitter in TCR.
Elias Roman and Forrest Landy, then Rob Casera and Murphy Nichols. They'll start basically 27th through 30th in the overall order. John Chrissy, David Alessi, 31st and 32nd. They're row number 3 in TCR. A relatively short pace lap here, Tom, so we're going to let the rest of those scroll on the screen as we head back to the front of the field here. And we'll watch the field come down the back straightaway. We are 40-plus cars strong here this week, as we were at Circuit of the Americas last week. And of course, we've got RP Performance and Radial Tire on board sponsoring these events. And as we come to a 40-minute race, give me a prediction, Tom. Who wins in GT4? Who wins in TCR?
Well, this is just a crapshoot at this point, but this is such a short warm-up lap. The pressure is on, the tires are cold, and the field is feeling the pressure coming up to this green flag. Round the chicane, and we're coming green flag racing for the DC Region Virtual Racing League.
Time to go racing. Green flag flies, and we're green from Donington National Circuit. 40 minutes as the field thunders down towards turn number 1. M4s and Porsche Caymans, 3 wide, 4 abreast as they head down to the first corner.
Look at Andrew Palata is on this left side of the track, but backs out pretty early on the inside of Alex Larose, I think that was. But DJ Alessandrini wasn't able to hold the point as confidently as he would have liked. Thomas Layton rejoins back into the middle of traffic. Everybody seems to avoid. No, a couple cars go for a ride down the high-speed S's, and now the TCR cars coming to their green flag through that final chicane.
Oh, trouble for some of the GT4 cars as the TCR field comes to the green. Now Elias Roman is your pole sitter on the right side of your screen in that white and blue and red car. Very, very slow start, 30 miles an hour. There's going to be a lot of wheel spin here when they come to the green, and the GT4 cars are making lap time behind them. They got to get going here shortly, and there's the green flag for TCR. Roman fires off. This will probably be a much cleaner start. As in the background, you can already see those GT4 cars.
Yeah, that's going to be kind of a disaster, as it's going to be less than 2 laps before the GT4 cars catch these TCR cars, I think. But the TCR cars, really cold rear tires. There's fewer of them, so it's a little less premium for track space. But here it is, the front of GT4 already in the final chicane. TCR is going to have a bunch of BMWs and Porsche up their trumpet in just a few minutes' time. Look at Andrew Palata run down the front straightaway into turn 1.
Oh, side by side, 3 wide into the first corner. Larose into second. Hausil to third. Palata wanted second place. He couldn't get it done. Touch with Ryan Maloney on corner exit. They rub doors, rub fenders as Paul Darling watches from 6th.
Wow, and Darling actually did not get a very good start, all the way back to 6th place from 2nd on the grid. So Larose, Hausil, Palata, and Maloney all moving up a position, which is allowing DJ Alessandrini to get away. And that's going to allow Alessandrini the comfort of picking and choosing his spots in traffic a little more. Whoa, Darling goes for a tank slapper and spins it.
Wow, that's an uncharacteristic mistake for Paul Darling. He loops it around, backs it off into the grass. He'll have to get rolling here shortly. Back to TCR. Lap 1 complete for them. Roman, Forrest Landy, Kucera, Murphy Nichols, and David Alessi. They're all strung out nice and tidy, and relatively little chaos, except as I say that, you see Darian Taggart and John Chrissy. They found their way. That's big contact, and here they come right back onto the racetrack in front of the GT4 leaders. Alessandrini has to have his guard up here as the other car gets rolling.
Yeah, and he's officially into TCR traffic. It was a really good heads up from the TCR car to not pull back onto the track in front of the GT4 leaders, but the GT4 leaders are absolutely now in this battle. And I was alluding to before, DJ Alessandrini having a little bit of that gap up to the rest of the field. That allows him to be a little more patient and a little more calculated when he gets into the TCR traffic, because he doesn't have the pressure from behind that the rest of the field has. The rest of the field may inherit a nice little gift from Alessandrini if he gets balked in TCR traffic, but it's much less likely if you're flying solo than if you're in a big train of cars like the rest of GT4 is. Still absolutely not spread out, still only working lap number 3.
Slide for Gross, can he hang on to it? Great job hanging on cold tires with traction control. This car is deadly. He manages to hang on to the car. Meanwhile in TCR, Elias Roman has his rear wing full of Forrest Landy down into the chicane.
See how much curb they use. All of the first one, but not much of the second one, and it's kind of a 3-car breakaway with those top 2 and the number 7 car still clinging onto the back. But if they can break away just a bit before they get caught by those GT4 leaders, that will be really kind of solidifying that those drivers are going to be the top 3.
And we see another car go off, and there's Will Robbins, big slide through turn 1. So does Murphy Nichols. They're all going to run wide. And again, to get this rear end sliding, it's hard to keep the car from kind of traveling that sideways through turn number 1. Wow, big jump for Paul Darling over the curbing. And that is an example of a driver on a mission, as we saw him come through there. We got to go back and have a look at that replay as he came down in here. Tom, watch this.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of red mist going. I blew it early, but I have time to make it up. Wow, just pounds over those curbs.
Behind him, Thomas Layton making up for lost time, getting by Chad Griffith in the number 38 car. That's a M4. Let's go back to TCR again. Can't figure out what I want to watch here, Tom. It's getting too good in both categories right now. Landy and Kucera going for second place, but that 3-car breakaway just getting stronger right now.
And this is feeling a little bit like a Lime Rock race where the things are happening so fast it's hard to keep track of, but it's still Roman at the front. And then Landy, and the big question mark for me is how much experience does Rob Kucera have in that number 7 car? Does he have anything left to learn, and will he be able to learn that over this race distance? We still have 35 minutes of 40 minutes to go, and so much has happened already.
Well, we've had a lot of drivers have pretty serious damage or crash their car entirely. Jeff Miner, Darren Heath, Richard Spicer, Darian Taggart, all in pit lane or damaged at some point. Meanwhile, Crisbal Rodriguez, he has found his way off course. And turn back around and forward again. Christopher Lapros on the back of Maloney. This battle for fourth has traded spots a few times as they're now in pretty heavy TCR traffic.
Yeah, TCR cars just kind of pulling off to the side at this point, allowing some of the leaders of GT4 to come through. Whoa, that's a really tough spot. Palata and the number 20 car sweep around the outside, but that was tight for the third car in the train there.
Lapras up to fifth after starting in 8th place. Ryan Maloney 6th to 4th, so forward progress for them. And Andrew Palata 7th to 3rd, so +4 for him. But no one is able to run down Alessandrini. I will say though, Alex Larose last time by was about a half a tenth quicker than DJ Alessandrini, but you're gonna have to be quicker than that if you want to run him down. I think what's helping also is having to negotiate through traffic. Yeah,
at this point it's absolutely a roulette with traffic because these drivers are going to they're really not going to get a clean lap for the rest of the race. So that's going to be over 25 laps of interaction with other cars from other classes, and it's just a matter of managing how high can your average lap time stay when you're dealing with other cars from other traffic. This is Will Robbins and David Alessi going side by side into turn number 1, slowing each other down just a little bit inside the top 10 of TCR, but figuring it out as they come down the S's for working lap number 6, I believe.
Lap 6, approximately 34 in this race if we go green from start to finish. And several battles scattered throughout the field. Here's Ken Halseal, Daniel Gross, and I think that's Kevin Zhu in the 243 as they come down the S's. That's a hard spot to be side by side, but they got singled out. In the background, you see Ryan Daner in the Rum Bum car, I believe is what's back there as he runs in 10th spot.
Yeah, these drivers have yet to encounter pretty heavy TCR traffic, but there is one TCR car in the middle. There's lights flashing on the Porsche, but Donington Park, it looks like a relatively simple track when you put it on a piece of paper, but you're almost never going straight, and that's what makes working with these other class cars and other traffic and even inter-class battles so much more challenging than other tracks, even like COTA, where you get those big long breaks down some of the longer straightaways.
DJ Alessandrini out of the lead. He's spun out of the race lead. So the 61 goes from 1st down to 5th. Oh. Let's go back and figure out what happened there, but that is a huge happen. He was going around the outside, contact from Will Robbins. Oh, he just obliterated him. Holy cow.
Was kind of out of the way. I think he was trying to lift and protect that position. Alessandrini shoved it up the outside and cut down. It was maybe some miscommunication between whether or not Robbins was defending or letting Alessandrini through, but Alessandrini absolutely confidently cut to the apex. Robbins maybe not giving him enough of a checkup there, and hopefully there's not sustained damage to the back of that BMW. It looks like he's back on pace, but that's a really unfortunate situation for the 61 car. I have a sneaking suspicion that that is not the last time we're going to see TCR and GT4 traffic influence the race.
This is for the lead in front of him. 3 drivers all going for it. Palata, Maloney, Lapras, 1, 2, 3, all under a blanket right now. All M4s too. Alex Larose and Alessandrini back to the Cayman, and then another M4 in 5th. That's DJ as they sweep through turn number 8 and head down to the chicane. More traffic ahead as the battle for the lead rages on.
And Alessandrini's got a run on Larose, who must have had something happen as well, because Larose was up in 2nd last time I remember checking in on him. But now Palata, Maloney, and Lapras hold the point for the BMWs. Alessandrini trying for the over-under, gets the outside run, and will easily take the position down to turn number 1. So it's going to be BMW's top 4 in GT4, a very stark contrast to last week's race at COTA. But it's really the inter-class battles, the battles between TCR and GT4 working together to not influence the competition too much. Maybe that comes back to the co-opetition you talked about. That has absolutely been the storyline this race.
And right in front of these drivers right now is 6th place David Alessi in TCR. And catching him at an interesting spot on the racetrack. See the headlights flashing on Palata. He will go through. Watch the 34 keep it on the blacktop, buddy, as the rest of the field streams on by in GT4. And they're breaking away, or trying to break away from Alessandrini right now. Just up the road, it's still a 3-horse fight at the front in the Audi RS3 TCR. And Elias Roman consistently has been the quickest around this racetrack, but Landy and Casera, they are hanging tough, and they're not letting him get away.
And maybe a bit of patience going on right now in TCR, because there is front tire management in the front-wheel drive touring cars. You see the nice composed body language of all 3 of these cars, as they may not even really be trying to pass one another at this point. But headlights ablaze, the top of TCR is trying to catch the back, and then now he's absolutely caught the back of GT4 traffic. So interclass battles between both the top of GT4 into the back of TCR, but also the top of TCR into the back of GT4. This field is completely blended together at this point.
So think about last week at Circuit of the Americas. At the top of the order, we had Paul Darling, Ken Ausiel, and DJ Alessandrini all slicing and dicing. Well, Alessandrini's down to 4th. Paul Darling is in 9th, and Ken Ausiel is in 10th. So all the drivers that we expected to run well today already have had issues as we go back to a battle for second. Certainly they're not out of the race by any stretch just yet, but their road just got a lot harder.
Yeah, and Palata got a gift in traffic there. He's got a big 10 car length lead over Maloney and Lapras. Alessandrini's up on the back of this battle at this point too. So it's the top 4 BMWs and GT4 have come together, but a little bit of an advantage for Palata. And then in TCR, again, a little bit of patience at this point, but it's not going to be long before the top of GT4 is into the top of TCR. We're only a quarter of the way into this race with just under 30 minutes left.
Can't believe it's only been like 11 minutes of action as we head down into the chicane. And it feels like we've had an entire race go so far, up and over the tops of the curbs. See the first place car, that kind of ocean teal off in the distance. As 1st through 4th, as you mentioned, M4s all in a row. No other major battles going on in GT4. Back up at TCR, though, they're just about to catch those leaders. And Elias Roman continues to hold a 4/10 of a second lead. All he's got to do is not make a mistake, but with GT4 traffic going to interfere here shortly, it's going to be increasingly difficult to just be able to run your own race. You have to, at some point, have to facilitate those passes, whether it's making sure that you don't get run into from behind or getting out of the way when they come barreling through.
Sure, this is definitely a race of mistake management, and it looks like the pace goes to Elias Roman, which is what we saw last week at COTA. He also had the pace to just kind of drive away from the field when given the opportunity, and he stayed really cool in traffic last week as well. And then you look back at Landy and Kucera, those two, the 33 car goes for a ride. That is just outside the top 10 in GT4.
Ryan Daner in the 33 car. Let's go back and have a look exactly how he got himself in this position. On the entry to turn 4, just got in the dirt there, Tom. And you drop a tire on the corner of the racetrack heading into a turn, that'll send you around.
Yeah, in that corner specifically, because you want to get it set up as wide as possible on the driver's left coming into it, but it's really easy to just drop that tire on the way in, and it sends you for a long and wild ride. So he's going to drop back a couple of positions in that beautiful Rum Bum livery replica, though actually looks like he may not have lost many positions. Back to where he started, back to 13th, as he'd worked his way up close to the top 10.
All the progress gone for Ryan Daner. He will get back rolling. Big jump over the curbing in the chicane. We'll jump back up to GT4. Andrew Palata's lead continues to expand, a 1.3 second gap now. Alessandrini, you're looking really hungry behind Christopher Lapras, but he's been stuck here for about 2 laps now. I'm starting to wonder how difficult passing is going to be amongst all this chaos.
Oh, it's going to be really, really hard. It comes down to, again, mistake management and finding your places when it comes to traffic. So it's a similar shape to what we saw shaping up at the beginning, even though it's different players. Andrew Palata will have a little bit more time to make moves and be smarter about making moves in traffic because he has that right about 1.4 second lead over this really tight battle for second. Where the rest of these drivers, they don't really have great opportunities to pass one another unless a mistake or traffic comes into play. So even though Alessandrini absolutely had the pace of the field in qualifying, obviously he started on pole, Maloney and Lapras, as long as they don't make any mistakes, they're going to make themselves really tough to pass.
So now it just looks like we're settling in. Alessandrini far from it, though. Big dive on the brakes into the first corner. Not really an attempt to pass there, just getting out of the mirrors of the drivers in front, Lapras and Maloney. Cold as ice as they head down through turn number 2 and into the S's on a roller coaster down this hill. You plunge down a couple dozen feet before you sling it through turn 4. And again, this is such a line-sensitive corner. A bit of a hop and skip over the curbing for the second place 20.
And I think in the front, is that Forrest Landy that had a little mistake on the front straightaway and has allowed, or is that other TCR traffic running the same livery?
No, that is Forrest Landy in the third position.
Yeah, Landy dropped out of the battle for the top of TCR, which is now blended with the lead of GT4. So Landy making a mistake someplace on the early part of this lap. That's allowed Rob Kucera to stay in front and move up to 4th. Now Andrew Palata pops out on the battle for 1st in TCR, and Maloney starts to work his way through traffic. Got himself a gift on the brakes into the final chicane. We'll have a break.
That's the leader, Elias Roman. Big slide through the final corner. He's got a cut course. He has to slow down. DJ Alessandrini dives to the left to miss a couple slower cars, but Roman gives up the race lead with a mistake through that final chicane.
It's absolute chaos as the leaders of both classes have come together. Roman drops out, and now that promotes Rob Kucera from 3rd last lap all the way up to the first position in TCR. Now he's got a mirror full of Maloney down this bent straightaway, turns 2, 3, and 4. And you can see even though the GT4 cars are faster down this section of the track, there's nowhere for him to go. Maloney's going to try anyway, and Kucera opens the door. That's courteous, smart driving, and that's the kind of gap that if you have a little bit of breathing room, oh, it's not done yet, and now Roman comes around the outside.
He wants back through. DJ Alessandrini got a spot in that, almost 3 wide as they come through turn number 7, side by side for the lead in TCR, and Alessandrini can do nothing but watch it.
Yeah, he's got to just wait and pick his places, and it looks like the outside lane is going to work out for Kucera, but not for Alessandrini. Still has not gotten around Roman and Kucera, as he still has Lapras. They're going to go 3 wide down the straightaway towards the chicane. No, Lapras lifts a little to tuck back in.
Yeah, Lapras almost tried to use the TCR car as a pick heading through that corner. Wasn't able to do it. Real slow through here, side by side with the leader in TCR. Alessandrini runs wide. All the while, Palata and Maloney running away as DJ finally gets clear to the TCR traffic, but now has Lapras on the outside.
Yeah, he's clear of the TCR cars, but not of the GT4 cars. Lapras is going to try to hold the outside around turn 1. I don't think it's going to work for him. DJ shuts the door. No, look at Lapras, still has a nose on the rear quarter panel of the 91 car, so they're going to go side by side down this kink straightaway through turns 2, through turns 3, and now finally Lapras checks the brakes and gives Alessandrini the position.
Oh, big dive on the brakes into turn 4 for Kucera, trying to hang on to the lead in TCR. He hangs onto it. Great run there as Forrest Landy has a look to driver's right of Elias Roman. Spectacular battles inside the top 5 in both categories, and we're not even halfway done.
I was going to say, in theory, we're going to see this happen one more time because we're only 23 minutes, we're still 23 minutes left to go, over half distance of this 40-minute race, which means we're going to see the leaders of TCR and GT4 have to navigate each other within the last 5 minutes of this battle, and that completely changed the shape of this race in both classes. So this race is not going to be done until the very last minute. There's no way that we're going to be able to predict who's going to be at the top when they cross the start-finish line on that last lap.
Watching Daniel Gross and Evan Schickel go at it for 6th place in GT4. Jump over the curbs in the background. You see Paul Darling and Ken Hausil. They've been stuck in 9th and 10th. They've been unable to do pretty much anything with that. As here's that battle for 6th and the run down to turn 1.
It's a pop for, that is Schickel on Gross. So Schickel in the Tic Tac BMW, he actually, I think, had a big slide on that first lap, but he's going to take the position into turn number 1. The 37 of Gross is going to have to give it up. Zoo has done a good job to stick into this fight, and Darling is there. I don't know exactly what happened to Ken Hausil, but he's dropped way off as he's 4 seconds back in the distance. This is a risky move from Darling, but it's a really smart one to try to put Kevin Zoo off in an awkward position, and it worked a little bit. Darling has the advantage and will hold the outside along these corners, which becomes the inside for the next corner, turn number 7. He gains the position. That's the 8th now for the 155.
It's like a game of chess at 100 miles an hour, and you're just trying to see who's going to make the next move. We go back to TCR lead. Robert Kucera hangs onto it for now. Elias Roman in second. I think he's got a bit more pace than that leading number 7 car, so we'll keep our eye on that. Speaking of pace, going back to the GT4 lead, Ryan Maloney last time by was 4/10 quicker than the race leader, and he is reeling in Andrew Palata.
Wow, and there was no traffic to really influence that. You look, they're all by themselves on the track, so the number 20 car that we ride along with right now has the pace of the entire field and then some. And Andrew Palata maybe just kind of taking it easy as he has a breather there. I think they're going to get a whole nother lap of clear traffic, which comes at a premium around Donington Park apparently. But dust flies as these guys are still not backed off the pace.
Palata was a little off the racetrack there at the exit of turn number 4. Back to TCR. Roman down the inside in 4. He's got it. Can Kucera cross him up? He's got a great run here out of 4. So does Forrest Landy. They tuck back in line and push each other up the hill.
Wow, and that's a really tough move to pull off. Impressive stuff from the 99 of Elias Roman, and they have to be careful and sort this out pretty quick because they have the battle for 6th with Gross, Schickel, and Darling right on them now. So it's going to be back to TCR GT4 interactions as the TCR leaders got 1 lap of breather, but they're back to having to deal with faster cars swarming them.
Big slide for Evan Schickel. Got the right side tires in the grass as Alex Larose tries to go by. Whoops, excuse me. It's Daniel Gross in the 37. Oh no! Oh. Schickel cuts the chicane, slides through it. He loses control of the car, slams the tire barrier, and Schickel's out.
Yeah, and he fortunately didn't influence the rest of the cars around him. Went for, I think, maybe realized he was too late on the brakes, dove for the inside, and took a big ride. But I don't think anybody else was really even affected by that. There, he dives to the inside, and then the front tires are going to catch. The car goes for a big slide, but everybody else makes it through nice and clean. So unfortunately for the 27, his day may be done for the top 10 battle, but everybody else makes it through cleanly.
Well, that was a bit worrying. Rob Casera had a great view of that. He's losing some ground to Elias Roman behind Paul Darling. But back up at GT4, 3/10 of a second lead, and it's coming down.
I would say it's pretty much gone. Those two are absolutely within striking distance of one another, and Maloney has been the impressive car for the last couple of laps. Just straight up ran down Palata on raw pace, and they still have a little bit of space to go before they get back into traffic. We've just now hit halfway through the race, under 20 minutes to go, so we're going to see a whole nother round of what we just witnessed happen once more.
So I think we have a second to breathe, at least for one moment. And as I say that, we'll go back to Ken Seal. He's going through lap traffic right now and jump over the curbs. That is, I believe, Forrest Landy. Actually, that is Rob Casera right in front of him. Forrest Landy behind as we see Kevin Zhu get by him. And in the way background, you see Murphy Nichols in 4th in class. I think he wanted a podium and probably felt like he should have had one last week at Circuit of the Americas in the number 5. But today so far, the car looks clean, hasn't had any major issues, and I think he's probably just happy to finish one off.
Sure, and if he doesn't have the pace, he's doing the smart thing to just kind of stay clean. He's got a little bit of damage on the right rear, it looks like. But if that car, if anything happens to the front 3, who have been dodging disaster for laps and laps on end, Murphy Nichols could inherit a podium pretty quickly. This is the battle for 5th, or 4th and 5th, I should say, between Lapras and Larose. And Larose showing the nose on the way into turn number 8. Nothing's going to happen there for sure, but applying the pressure pretty heavily to Lapras, who's starting to lose touch to Alessandrini. And in all that, pretty quietly, Alessandrini has worked his way back up into 3rd and can start to set his sights on crossing his fingers at least to catch Palata and Maloney, who have a really big gap, 4 seconds all the way back to Alessandrini in 3rd.
Still a 3/10 of a second lead down into turn number 1 with 18 minutes to go, past the halfway point now. Gross and Darling, he's around in the chicane. And the race leader is off in TCR as he tries to go around it. Let's go back and have a look here as they came down towards the chicane.
Looks like he's going to get a run alongside Danny Gross. They're going to go side by side into the chicane, and I bet this comes down to, although it's actually contact on the way in, both of them go for a big slide, but it ended up being Darling that got the short end of the stick. Gross probably got a little bit of a course cut and will have to back the pace down on the front straightaway, but had the room to do it and will end up keeping the position. I was going to guess there was some curb hopping involved with that one, but not the case. So those two have now separated just a little bit.
Back up to Lapras and Larose, and for the race lead, now it's about half a car length, and Maloney, if he can time this right, he'll have a good run either into the chicane or turn number 1, and if not this lap, next.
Well, it kind of comes back to what we were seeing early in the race where even though the 3 BMWs were glued together, they couldn't really do anything with one another. So now that Maloney has caught Palata, it may come back to traffic before Maloney really gets a chance to do anything with him. That said, he's going to take a look to the outside in turn number 1. He's got a run with 17 minutes to go, and the 20 car late on the brakes.
Oh, if he could do this around the outside, that would be a phenomenal maneuver. And side by side through turn number 2, Maloney on the outside is trying to get this pass done. Palata tries to refuse it, but he can't. Look at the pass on the outside through 1 and 2. Maloney to the lead.
Wow, that was incredible, because not only are you on the outside for turn 1, but you're on the outside for turns 2 and 3 as well. And Maloney, with a decisive move late on the brakes, takes the point away from Palata. All this battling has brought DJ Alessandrini 1 full second closer, that time through, only 3 seconds back. And that battle for 4th is not going anywhere. Lapras and Larose, I honestly think Larose might be the fastest car on track right now, but he can't get through Lapras to do anything with it.
Yeah, last time by, he was the 2nd fastest driver in the top 5. DJ Alessandrini was the quickest. But Larose was a full half-second quicker than the 2nd place car and 0.2 better than the top driver, Ryan Maloney. So let's keep our eye on this number 3 car. Still a long way from over 60 minutes. We saw earlier how long that time really is. And let's say Larose has not been easy on that Porsche suspension tonight. He's been cutting every chance he can get down there in the chicane.
Well, I think these Porsche drivers have realized they have to be risky when it comes down to that chicane, and it's interesting to see that it really hasn't paid off for them, as all the Porsche contenders have dropped off of the top 5 battle. Larose is the last remaining contender, but Darling, who's gotten around Gross, and then Seal, who's worked his way back up to 8th. The Porsche's running 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. That's a big difference from last week at COTA, and I think we're going to see that ebb and flow throughout this entire season with the DC Region Virtual Racing League.
Yeah, it seems like it. Meanwhile, for the lead in TCR, it's sort of palm down for now. Elias Roman has a 7/10 of a second lead over Rob Casera, but we do expect that they will end up kind of having to deal with traffic at least one more time in a significant fashion. And for now, I think this is the first time we've had a chance to really take a breath as we go back to 11th place, Chad Griffith and Scott Merker.
Yeah, and a thought I had is that Elias Roman has really done a good job for two races in a row to keep his head cool. He hasn't always had the upper hand in this battle like he had last week at COTA, but either way, he's played it cool and worked his way back to the front in TCR. So I think that 99 car is really establishing himself as the contender to beat in TCR for this 9-race season, while Merker starts to work back and forth, showing his nose in the mirrors to the BMW. Not able to do anything with it as he's about 2 car lengths back. And they're just in front of that 33 car, I think, that we saw go for a ride of Daner earlier in the race.
You know, one thing that's really interesting to me is how, look at this shot here. How dimensionally larger the BMW is than the Porsche. I mean, it's like a pickup truck compared to a smart car out there. And that's got to be intimidating. Oh, there's a car in the fence. Lausen is nosed into the barrier in the final corner. And that car has a lot of damage. You see the right front suspension smashed in. Let's have a look at how he found himself here. Here's a replay. Just got the car back end out and parked it into the barrier pretty hard.
Ooh, that was a big one. Yeah, it looks like he might have called it a day back to the pit lane. So a quick tow and he might get back out there. But he was running 5th. That was a good effort up to that point. But even when the tires are hot and the race is mostly done, these TCR cars are a handful from the back end.
Yeah, but going back to the Cayman versus M4, that's got to be intimidating being a smaller car. That's not something that the TCR cars in the real world have a big issue with. They're all pretty much the same scale. But in GT4, there's a pretty wild difference between the smaller cars in the category and the larger ones. And I would not want to be the one in the smaller car running toe-to-toe. Meanwhile, back at the front, Andrew Palata has re-caught Ryan Maloney, battle for the lead.
Yeah, they haven't really gotten apart from each other at all. It's still under a half a second gap between the two. The gap back to third is now down to 2.6 seconds. So as long as these two aren't bickering between the two of them, they seem to have the pace to kind of keep at least 2 or 3 tenths a lap at bay of DJ Alessandrini, who's just in that quick sector alone clawed in 2 tenths of a second. Larose still hunting on the back of Lapras, and those two are maintaining a pretty impressive pace. While Lapras is driving defensively to stay in front of the top Cayman, the number 3 car that we're looking back at right now.
Now on the straightaway as they run down to the chicane, half a second between the GT4 leaders. How about a 1/10 of a second between the TCR leaders? They're going back at it again. Roman and Casera through turn number 7. You can't give these guys 2 seconds. They're not going to calm down. The race goes on.
Like the needy child that needs attention. As soon as we look away, they do something exciting that we have to come back to. But Elias Roman got a good run out of turn 7 and now has a little bit of a gap, 2 car lengths maybe, up into turn 8 as they work their way towards the chicane. 12 and a half minutes to go, so I think that's about 5, maybe 6 more laps. And that means we're coming back into the time where the TCR and GT4 leaders may start to intercept one another once more in this 40-minute race.
Across the line now, Robert Casera that time was at full 10th quicker and sits in behind, revving the tack out to the top of 5th gear as they head down into turn 1. So this fray will continue as it has for most of the race. A bit of a slip by Elias Roman, and now they're going to run down the hill. These cars have a lot of downforce considering their weight. They're pretty sticky cars in the high-speed corners, and this makes that a pretty hard place to get passes done. But building runs isn't necessarily easy either, especially on the exits and tight corners where those front tires, they got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, you really have to do it in the higher speed stuff in the TCR cars, and that's what Roman did to regain the lead. He had that decisive move down on the inside of turn 4 maybe 5 or 6 laps ago, and he's been able to maintain that point over Rob Casera. But remember, we speculated early on in this race, Rob Casera may not have as much experience in the TCR car as he does in other platforms. We've seen him a lot in MX5 Cup cars and others. What are you highlighting here?
I can't say this on stream, but those that have the 1080p resolution, Tom is on 720, but you'll see it later.
Copy that. Well, either way, I think Rob Casera may be still on his learning curve a little bit in the TCR car, where Elias Roman is absolutely well versed in this car over multiple seasons and multiple groups. So I wouldn't be surprised to see as Casera continues to learn, he's going to be able to ramp up this pressure more and more for the last 10 minutes of this race.
Through turn number 1.
Oh.
now you got it. Got close enough to take a look at the license plate on the back of the race leader as they head down the hill. 1, 2, 3, all separated by 4 tenths of a second. Ryan Maloney out front of Andrew Palata, then DJ Alessandrini in third. He is now 1 second back from that second place car. And we are going to have those 3 GT4 leaders condensed just like we have in TCR right now. And still potential for traffic with 10 minutes to go.
Sure. Looking just at timing and scoring, Andrew Palata has dropped off at the back of Ryan Maloney pretty significantly that last time through by the tune of almost a second, which means DJ Alessandrini is almost a second back of him. There they are on the front straight, heavily within traffic, and the matter of question becomes, can they maintain the gaps to each other as they work their way through the mid-pack of TCR? They're not only in the back of TCR, but they're in the back of GT4 at this point.
Francois Brou has 0 miles an hour on the timing screen. That's because he's gone around. Looks like it's the exit of turn 4, maybe?
I think you're right. Turn 4 at the bottom of the hill. Caught grass on the way in, just like we've seen others do. Unfortunately, couldn't get her stopped, and will go for a awkward ride all the way to the wall. The ABS of that car fighting getting it stopped.
Well, going for a little sightseeing here in Leicestershire, England, as he gets back rolling down in 20th. Not been a great day for him. Trying to figure out where we want to keep our eyes. Let's focus back on the 4th place battle. Larose has been stuck here in the final 9 minutes. Does that desperation start to rise, and how brave will Larose be on the brakes here to try to get by that M4?
Yeah, the desperation has to be setting in at this point as they're working their way through GT4 back markers, and that comes back to what we talked about really early in the broadcast about the BMW GT4 being a little quicker in a straight line and really easy to make wide around here, the narrow Donington circuit. It's just kind of tough to pass because it gets its legs halfway down the straightaways, and it's pretty good on the brakes, so it's really tough to get around when you're in the Porsche. There's nowhere like last week at COTA where the Porsche can really shine, either in momentum sections or in really, really slow digs. Those just don't really exist at Donington Park.
While the lead continues, we'll go back a little bit deeper in the field. This is almost a lap down from the TCR leader. We haven't talked about the other drivers in the field. Sebastian Landy runs in 6th in TCR. Benson Ty 7th. John Chrissy in 8th. And Louis Alessi, John Willem, and Peter Lausen, Will Robbins. Darian Taggart out early with crash damage. But the fight, for the most part, at TCR has all been focused on those podium drivers, and they have not relinquished for 1 second. You got to be exhausted by the end of this thing.
Yeah, with 8 minutes to go, I think especially if you're either Maloney or Roman, they're just waiting and begging for that white flag to come out. Whoa, Roman gets in deep into turn 4, and that's going to allow Kucera and maybe Landy as well to get a run on him towards turn number 6 into turn 7. Wow, Kucera slams the door and maintains the point. Whoa, look at Landy up the inside of Roman, who's trying to get in the outside to keep that second position, but a rare mistake from Roman. We haven't seen that yet this season, really.
Yeah, he just got in a little hot into turn 4 and missed the turn-in point, then got all the tires in the dirt. We talked earlier about the dirt. Look how dirty it is on the right outside the rubbered-in line. All this area, if you touch that, you're going to understeer into oblivion. That's what we saw happen to Roman. Once he was offline, it was game over. He just had to wait for the tires to come back to him. Oh, no, up the inside! And who is that? That's Leighton that's going to chuck it down there. Missed it on the brakes. Almost took out the leader in TCR.
Yeah, holy cow. I'm not quite sure what that was. To make a mistake that big this deep into the race, we're going to see it pan out. It looks like he was trying to outbrake Forrest Landy to maintain that position, just way too deep on the brakes, and bails out of it early, which was a smart call. But I think, unfortunately, it's going to go for a big ride into the tires.
And still on the side of the racetrack right now, Kenau Seal still sitting in 9th as it stands. No closer in GT4 at the moment. Is Leighton going to bail to pit lane? And Kucera, with that move, has got himself a 1.1 second lead with approximately 6 laps to go. I'm feeling pretty good about where he is, provided that he doesn't have more traffic, and I don't think anybody can guarantee that.
No, I think there's going to be quite a bit more traffic before this thing is said and done, but we've alluded to it. Kucera, learning curve in the TCR car and maintenance of the TCR car is a big question, and at this point he's starting to just drive away from Elias Roman. The rear bumper of Elias Roman's car kind of manifesting itself in turn 4 a couple laps ago, and he has not been able to rally from that and is just dropping like a rock off of the back end of the number 7 car.
Back into GT4. Now I'm interested in the race lead because Ryan Maloney's has dwindled down to 0.3 of a second. Palata comes through. I wonder if Maloney got a cut course because he just gave up a full second in that sector alone. And here's Alessandrini. So it's a 3-way fight in GT4 with 5 minutes to go and a 3-way fight in TCR with 5 minutes to go. And Palata and Alessandrini, well, they smell blood in the water as Maloney was slow through that middle sector.
Yeah, big time. And there is one GT4 lapped traffic car in the middle of that sequence, the 4th BMW in line. The other green car Ooh, Palata's deep on the brakes. He shows the nose. No, does not able to make it happen. But that fourth GT4 car was lap traffic, and I think that might have had to do with Maloney losing some time this time through. Now this time with that attack, Palata has lost some distance, and Maloney is able to enjoy about a half a second lead, so he's got a little bit of that margin back, but now Alessandrini is absolutely in this battle and looking really racy in the 91 car. 61 car.
He's out for blood after getting sort of taken off course by one of the TCR cars earlier. I think he's got some vengeance that he would like to dish out to somebody or something. These guys didn't do anything to him, but he's going to obviously focus that towards his drive forward, and he's such a driven driver. He practices so much throughout the week. He's also in virtual reality, so he's got this like hyper-aware sense of where his car is. He's going to be a threat here at the end of this race. Meanwhile, Scott Merker has found his way off track, as he will find a clear spot in traffic to pull back on course.
He was battling just outside the top 10. But yeah, you have to wonder what would have happened in this race had Alessandrini not been spun early on. How far up the road could he possibly have worked his way? Looking back a little further, Paul Darling is still over 10 seconds off the back of the top 10 battle, and Ken Housefield actually dropped back a couple of positions as well. So no progress for those Porsche drivers. It looks like the BMW is absolutely the strength of the field in GT4, as Andrew Palata goes for a big jump over the turn 10 curb and gives Alessandrini an opportunity to go around the outside. And this has worked. Well, Maloney made it work a couple laps ago. Can Alessandrini do the same?
Dave Fitzgerald found the wall at the exit of turn number 10. He will reset back to the pit lane. Alessandrini around the outside. He slips on the grass, and Palata is going to stay dead even with him down through turn 2. Re-clears him, and that gave Maloney 8 precious tenths of a second.
Yeah, and that shows you just how impressive that move we watched Maloney do actually is, because Alessandrini was not able to replicate it. That's such a challenging thing to pull off. But Andrew Palata looks like he just doesn't have the confidence in the car to really race these other drivers around him, as he's kind of folding to the pressure from the attack of Maloney and now of Alessandrini, who almost was able to get a run out of turn 4 as well. I think that 61 car is really quick right now.
There is a lot of traffic up the road from GT4 leader Ryan Maloney. You'll see it there in the distance as they head down to the chicane. And Alessandrini sees this. This is really his last opportunity. We will have 3 laps to go or under next time by. He needs to get this pass done if he wants any chance at catching that number 20 car, but he can't get it done this time through the chicane.
And it's not over until the fat lady sings. The fat lady might be the BMW in this race, but these guys are catching those TCR cars really quickly. They've got a couple of GT4 lapped cars as well, so it is going to be a really high pressure last 2 or 3 laps, as Andrew Palata still has his mirrors full of that flat blue BMW of DJ Alessandrini, and the longer they battle, the further away Ryan Maloney pulls, who now has a full second lead over the battle for second.
In TCR, Robert Kutsera now has a 1.9 second lead over Elias Roman. It's 4 tenths behind that to find Forrest Landy. So that one has fizzled. The one out front has not. 7 tenths of a second. Palata had a big gain that time through either that or Maloney had lost. And now he's stuck behind traffic, going to go up the inside. He knows he doesn't have a lot of time left, and he's got to get through this traffic before they catch him.
No, but he does have a good buffer to be really smart about the moves that he makes, so he didn't have to necessarily be super aggressive in the TCR traffic. He can be really patient because he does have that 1 second lead. Now, unfortunately, with that TCR car going off track and the other TCR car now pulling off to the side, that is giving a gift to Palata and Alessandrini, because it's meaning that they do not have to navigate those TCR cars nearly as much. Action cam through the last couple of sections, and it looks like Alex Larose has dropped off the back of the battle from Chris Lapras, who's now in the fight. So now it's 4 BMWs at the front of GT4, all within striking distance of one another.
Back to TCR, second place, Elias Roman and Forrest Landy. Elias certainly had the pace to win this race, had the fastest lap of the drivers in the top 5. The fastest lap of TCR, but of course circumstances took him out of that fight, and now he's just making sure that he can at least take home a bronze. He's got silver right now, but Forrest Landy would love to take home something a little bit shinier.
Yeah, and Landy is absolutely within striking distance. There's going to be less of a battle with lapped traffic in TCR. These guys are kind of racing mano-a-mano at this point, but GT4 is absolutely not decided by the merit of, wow, look at this. Maloney's actually made a mistake maybe and dropped back into the fight, into the clutches of Andrew Palata.
We will have 1 lap to go. Next time by the stripe, it'll be about 3 miles worth of, or I should say 2 miles worth of driving around this 10-turn circuit. And Maloney has a half-second lead, but it could dwindle. Look at the gain Palata has on the brakes. White flag waving one more time around Donington for the DC Region SCCA Virtual Racing League.
Interesting to see all of these drivers avoiding the curbs through that last chicane on this lap. Will they get bolder and braver coming in there next time through. It's the white flag, and Andrew Palata has found speed in the number 96 car. Somehow has clawed his way back within 3/10 of the race leader, Ryan Maloney. The passing opportunities at this place are at a premium, and there is no lap traffic in front to influence this one.
Crucial corner here through 4.
Turn 4.
Good cut for the 96. He gained some ground there, lost a little bit on exit. Now they're going to run up the hill towards that turn 7, turn 8 complex, and then he'll get one more shot on the entrance and one more shot on the exit of that chicane. But Maloney keeps a 2-car length gap through 7.
Yeah, Palata's good on the brakes, but he loses the distance on the way out of the corner. There's going to be some cars rejoining the track just on entry of this corner. You see the tire tracks, and the car is going to be off to the outside, but they leave the space. So the leaders come through turn 8. There's only one more passing opportunity left. Palata looks like he has a little bit of a run. Pokes early.
One chicane left, one corner left. Palata dives on the brakes. He can't get there. Maloney through the chicane, and after starting in 6th position, he battled amongst the gods of men in the DC Region Virtual Racing League, and he wins at Donington. Palata 2nd. Alessandrini, the juggernaut of the series, finishes in 3rd. Lapras, Larose 4th and 5th. Darling, Gross, House Seal coming to the tail end of the top 10 here. They're all pretty much sorted as is. Meanwhile, in TCR, the lead is extended now to 2.7 for Casera Tom, Elias Roman, and Forrest Landy still going for 2nd.
Yeah, this battle for 2nd is not done yet, but it is pretty cool right now. There's about a second between these two drivers with, one lapped car in the middle, pulls off to the side, and it doesn't look like Forrest Landy is going to have the opportunity to charge on the brakes like Andrew Palata did, but Robert Casera played it cool and perfectly all the way through this entire race. Built his speed, maintained his front tires, will come across the line from 3rd place all the way up to 1st for a gold in the 2nd round of the DC Region Virtual Racing League in TCR.
Elias Roman 2nd, Forrest Landy in 3rd. Murphy Nichols will bring his car home in 4th place. I think he'll be pretty happy with that. But we just saw chaos, confusion, solid racing. We saw some spins and slides and crashes, a little bit of everything. But Ryan Maloney pulls it out. And wasn't even all that close. I mean, Palata had a look, but Maloney did a really good job finishing that one off tonight.
Yeah, I don't think either of us were quite prepared for how frantic that was going to be. That truly felt like a multi-class race at Lime Rock. And I'm have to wonder if any of these drivers saw that coming either. But Ryan Maloney, for me, that race turned a page and became his race when he made that decisive move around the outside of turn 1, held the position through the outside of turn 2, and slammed the door coming into turn 3 and was able to just kind of drive away, maintain his gap. Andrew Palata had a great run on that last lap, but otherwise kind of really wasn't the car to beat at any point in that battle. Was a really consistent driver. And comes home 2nd with Alessandrini. Unfortunately, early on getting a little bit of a spin from lap traffic. Will come home 3rd.
Gonna burn it down here on the start-finish line. You know why he's so excited, Tom? Because it's hard to win these races. It's not easy, and DJ knows it. And Ken Steele knows it, Paul Darling knows it, Ryan Maloney knows it too, how hard he had to work for that. I bet you he's sweating. Here's a look at your race results. Maloney, Palata, Alessandrini, Lapras, Larose, your top 5 in GT4. Then Darling brings it home 6th, Ken Steele in 8th. Disappointments for those two guys. I think they were probably expecting at least a top 5. Jumping down through the rest of the order here, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, Rob Casera bringing home a victory in TCR. He'll be proud of that. Elias Roman 2nd. After leading many laps today. Forrest Landy rounds out the podium in TCR. Murphy Nichols, David Alessi, the rest of the top 5. Pretty calm in TCR today. A couple slight incidents for some of the drivers towards the tail of the field, but most of the drama was in GT4, at least from the spins and slides side of things. So the front wheel drive keeping those cars planted on the ground today.
And I think that comes down to the track layout. This is one of the shortest tracks we'll see on the calendar for the DC Region Virtual Racing League. But next week at Laguna Seca, it doesn't get much better, as the fastest laps of that track will be right around 1.5 minutes. So the lap traffic is not going to go away. It's not going to not be a storyline next week, which means these drivers are going to have to get used to dealing with one another. But still an impressive race from Robert Casera to maintain composure through all of that chaos. In the number 7 car to maintain the lead. In TCR, Elias Roman and Forrest Landy with Murphy Nichols just missing out on the podium once again. He's going to be absolutely frantic for a podium by the end of this season if he can't get one soon.
All right, one last scroll through our results. We'll jump to break for just a few minutes. We'll be right back with post-race interviews from our podium drivers. Hang tight, we'll be right back. Welcome back live to Sim TV in the Washington, D.C. region SCCA Virtual Racing League, the second round of the winter 2020 season. Here now with our second place finisher, Elias Roman in the number 99. Elias, winner from last week, you led a bunch of laps here this week, but it wasn't meant to be. A lot of shuffling and skirting and sliding all over the place. Second place, still a podium, but you had the pace to win the race, so take us through your battle today and how you ended up in P2.
Yeah, today was wild to say the least. I thought COTA after the safety car was crazy, but this was like 10 notches up. Forrest and Rob were on my tail the whole time. Made a mistake in the chicane. Rob got by. Then I kind of pulled up a pretty brave move heading into turn 4, got back by him, and then chaos with the upcoming GS cars kind of split us. So I tried to push since Rob was out of draft range, but I guess I pushed the tires too hard, kept making mistakes in turn 4. He got by, and that was basically it.
Well, Elias Roman, second place tonight, first and a second, a great way to start the season. Probably still holding on to the points lead. Good luck to you next week at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. Nice job today, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Sure thing. Going to move on now to Forrest Landy in third place in TCR. A lot of shuffling at the front of the fields. It seems like you could just kind of shuffle a deck and whatever card came out on top was the race winner for us. But a third place run tonight and some laps led with all that chaos going on. Take me through your event and what you saw out the windshield chasing those front two.
Did I lead any laps?
I don't know. Did you? Who
No,
knows if anybody led any
did.
laps? Feels like everybody did at some point.
Watched the movie for the whole race. Yeah, I mean, Elias and Robert were the class of the field today, so I was just hanging on. I was honestly surprised I was that close, but it was chaos, especially with the Gt4 field. I mean, it was hard working around them, and I think there was some argy-bargy, and it was definitely a lot harder than last week in that sense. But I'm glad I think most of the field survived.
Most of the field did survive, and regardless of the tightness of the racetrack, kind of narrow and accident-prone around here. We head to WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca in 1 week. That track maybe not even less forgiving in some aspects, but that's a track that we have not been to in a while here in the series, especially not with multi-class. Your thoughts on Laguna Seca and how it'll be different from this week?
Yeah, honestly, after tonight, I'm debating taking that week off because it's tough. Everyone's going 110% and leave no quarter. But and Luke, I think you're dead right. Laguna Seca is going to be a little harder. It's more of a one-line track, and with the elevation and undulations, the braking zones are even more difficult.
Forrest Landy, third place tonight in TCR. Congrats. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Move on to our race winner in TCR. That, of course, is Rob Casera in the number 7. Great battles up front, and the way that we shuffled them, the way that we shook the can up, you came out the other side leading and won the race despite all the chaos and confusion everybody had to go through. Robert, walk us through your event tonight, what you saw at the windshield, what you saw in the mirror, and how you timed it to get yourself out front with that mistake from Elias.
Yeah, so I just wanted to keep it consistent. I knew that there's some fast guys in this group, and this is my first time racing with them. This is, I think, a handful of times I've raced the TCR car, so I was just coming in here trying to keep it together for the 40 minutes, keep it on the track. And Donington, it's a lot of tough passing, so it's really just running in line and knowing when to make a move, or if someone makes a mistake, jumping on it right away. So just wanted to come in here consistent and just keep it on the track.
Next week, we've got WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. I heard from Forrest Landy that he thinks it'll be even harder than this week. What are the chances you go 2 for 2 next week and get one done at Laguna Seca as well?
Yeah, we'll see. I'm hoping to make that one. I like racing with these guys. It's some tight race when everything's going well. So it'll be a joy to come out there and hopefully race with those guys again. I think it's going to be a pretty close one if it's anything like today.
All right, Rob Casera, winner in TCR. Rob, hey, congratulations. Good luck to you next week in California.
Thank you.
All right, move on now to our Gt4 podium. We'll start with DJ Alessandrini. I called him the juggernaut of the series. Third place tonight, though, DJ. Bronze after getting kind of knocked off course in turn number 8. What happened there? And take me through the rest of your night trying to drive back up through the field.
Yeah, I'm not too happy about that. The driver came over the mic and said, take the line, DJ, I'm going to lift, and then just proceeded to drive into the side of me. So I'm not entirely sure what that was. I think there might have been some Zach Rubin Hitman Emporium going on there, because that seemed I have no idea what that was. I am honestly baffled what that driver was doing. I watched it on the replay. It makes no sense. The guy literally just turned and ran right into my door. So Don't know. I think I recovered pretty well. Unfortunately, it took a little too much battling to get by Lapras, and then I had to reel in first and second place for the rest of the race. And then, after the contact, the car just didn't quite put down power the way it normally would. And by the end of the race, my rear tires were not feeling too great, and they drifted really well.
Well, a frustrating day, but a podium nonetheless. Pulls out a bronze, started second, finished third. DJ, better luck next week at Laguna Seca.
Thanks, appreciate it.
And on to Andrew Palata, who brought it home in second place in the number 96, only a 10.5 short of pulling out a victory. 7th to 2nd, Andrew, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Up and down the order all night long, passing for the lead, losing the lead, ultimately coming out a 10.5 short after 40 minutes of racing. Wow, fun to watch from the sidelines. It had to be a blast, or maybe nerve-wracking inside the car.
Oh yeah, I was nervous as all hell. I think I'm probably the most surprised out of everybody for that race. I had no pace coming into this. I didn't get much chance to practice, and I had a little chance to play around with it. But when I got into practice today and in a qualifying, I was like, oh boy, I'm kind of I'm in trouble here. But the luck kind of worked out in my favor in a lot of ways, so I'll take it.
And next week we head to WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca. That's a track that I think more people are familiar with. Do you think that helps you or hurts you heading into our third round of the season?
I don't think it's going to help me that much. That's not really my strongest track. I guess the same kind of goes for Donington, but I mean, I'm just going to kind of do my thing as much as I can, I guess, and hope for better luck, or at least more good luck next week.
All right, Andrew, hey, thanks for talking to us. Congratulations. We'll see if you can get up one spot better in California next week. Good luck to you.
Well, congrats on the new job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And moving on now to Ryan Maloney in the number 20. Race winner tonight from 6th to 1st. Got the pass done in the closing moments. And by only a 10.5 of a second, you pulled it out, Ryan. An epic battle through the pack, through the field, dodging TCR cars and GT4 cars alike, keeping the car on the on the track, I should say, and out of the grass. A fun race to watch from our perspective, as I was telling Andrew, but again, had to be super nerve-wracking, especially heading into that chicane for the final time.
Yeah, it was pretty hectic out there. A whole bunch of cars just going everywhere. Yeah, near the end, I could just tell the gap was getting smaller and smaller, and then I'd open up a gap, and then they'd get closer. And yeah, once I saw that checkered, I was happy.
It seems like it's few and far between that we see people uproot Alessandrini, and obviously a little bit of help from a TCR car this week. But what's the ultimate goal this season for you? We head to Laguna Seca, and then after that we head to Imola, Sebring, Alton Park, Suzuka, Monza, and Summit Point. So looking at the season as a whole, is there any sort of strategy that you approach this season with, or is it just go out and just try to beat DJ every week? Because that's what everyone's been trying to do. Is that what you're trying to do as well?
Yeah, pretty much that's about it. Just try to run as fast as possible. And yeah, I mean, DJ was out there already the race today, and just unfortunate for that to happen to him. But yeah, just go out there and drive as fast as possible.
All right, well, that's simple enough for me. Ryan, hey, congratulations. Good luck to you next week in Monterey, California at Laguna Seca. We wish you the best.
Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. Okay, well, that wraps things up, Tom. Wow, what a race. I'm still reeling from what we just watched. It was fun from all sorts of perspectives. I think DJ's a little frustrated, as I'm sure so many drivers share that sentiment of having frustration from the traffic jam that we saw today, but it doesn't get any better at Laguna Seca, and it probably will be a little bit better at Imola and Sebring, but then we go back to Alton Park, where I'd expect the frustration levels and the blood pressure to rise again. So your final thoughts on Donington and what we saw this afternoon?
Well, I think we just saw kind of the direction this season is going to go. If in my opinion, we're going to see more races like that, where we're going to have upsets, interactions between classes, and inter-class racing that is just absolutely next to none. And I think, last week at COTA, we had a relatively calm race, especially with that full course caution that took up a large portion of the race. The rest of the season is going to be a barn burner like that one, so it's going to be one to watch.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, my name's Kyle Heyer, joined by Tom O'Gorman. We'll see you in a week from WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca. Well, I'm not sure if we will see you in a week. Somebody will see you in a week, as we'll probably be on our way to NOLA Motorsports Park, but we'll have it here regardless, and make sure that you're tuning in at 8 o'clock next Wednesday for the track in California. And we'll watch you over the corkscrew as they come on through 40 drivers deep for the DC Region SCCA Virtual Racing League. Thanks again to the partners Radial Tire and RP Performance for sponsoring this season. And we'll see you in a week from right now. Again, my name's Kyle Heyer. We'll see you next time from Sim TV.